students. Whew, my babies. Each student has up to 25 minutes, including a short presentation followed by questions from our panel of judges. We are grateful to Judge Horton, Diane Smith, and Pastor Jim Harris for serving as our judges for this first group. We'll begin with our first student, Josiah Birch. Following Josiah, we will hear from Ava Palacios and Braddock Dickey.
I guess I'll get started. Hello everyone, my name is Josiah Birch, and I'm here to defend my senior thesis. But before I get started, I'd like to take the time to thank the judges for coming, and thank you for your time and for reading over my thesis. I'd also like to thank Ms. Jeannie for her help throughout the school year, and also my parents, whose feedback without I could not have done this project. Quote, "The world is a miracle in beauty and order. This can never be the result of coincidental causes. Rather, it is the making of a reasonable being who sought good and arranged everything on purpose and with wisdom." Plato. In this world, shelter is one of the main things that humans need to survive. It is where one eats, sleeps, lives, and laughs. It protects one from the outside elements and allows people to come together. Human shelters have evolved steadily from the earliest basic tents and structures all the way to today, with its large, well-thought-out homes and colossal air-conditioned spaces. As human culture has advanced over the millennia, so has architecture. It has made shelters more protected and comfortable over the years, and also spaces for community use have gained importance and popularity. But with so much architecture over so long of a time, one is forced to ask the question of when and how architecture is valuable. I propose that architecture is not as valuable when it does not adhere to the values of truth, beauty, and order. I decided to choose these values of truth, beauty, and order because they really are a great guideline for whatever we design or create. I think truth is an important value because architecture should always be built on a foundation of truth. Not just with the structural integrity of a building, making sure everything works well together, but also with worldviews and philosophies. Worldviews matter in the process of building a building, since things like greed and a worldview of trying to make things over-efficient can affect a building's end result and long-term use. Architects' philosophies will also influence buildings in similar ways. I also chose beauty as a vital value because beauty is such an important aspect of architecture, and the beauty of a building is one of the main things that make us love them and that they're remembered for. And part of what, not just beauty, but also a building's uniqueness is what makes it special and what makes it valuable. And that's really important, especially in today's day and age, for things to be unique and not everything to be built the same. However, but with beauty, it can be over-prioritized in architecture, and this is something I talked about in my thesis. In some of the earlier architectural styles, they had a lot of ornamentation and detail in their buildings, but oftentimes there was so much detail and so much ornamentation that the buildings kind of lost their purpose in all the stuff that was in them. And so they actually started to lose the order and real beauty that they needed. Moving on, I also chose order as my last vital value for this thesis. And order is important for everything in our life. God created our world with order, and it is the building block of everything we do. And a building's function and purpose are especially important for building. But I also talked, like I said before, just like beauty, it can be over-prioritized. And architects and builders can want order so much that they start to lose the beauty that really makes architecture valuable. We see this a lot today in our new urban and suburban developments, with many builders choosing to have the worldview of just wanting profit. And so their buildings, even though they may be full of order, they're not beautiful and not as valuable. Architecture can be beautiful, like any form of art. It can be full of order and useful, as well as based on a foundation of truth. But also, like any form of art, architecture can also be ugly. It can be chaotic, useless, and based on a foundation of dangerous lies. But as a whole, architecture, with all its heights of beauty and depths of dullness, come together to make our constructed surroundings. So it is important that we as the public take inventory of these buildings and our surroundings in order to see how to make them better. Architecture is important, and yet architecture is not as valuable when it does not adhere to the values of truth, beauty, and order. Thank you. I'm now ready for questioning.
I love beautiful buildings.
Yes, ma'am.
And tell us what your thesis is.
Yes, sir. So my thesis, the title goes along with it, it's architecture. What's it really worth? Architecture is not as valuable when it does not adhere to the values of truth, beauty, and order.
In your paper, you talk about truth from a viewpoint of a Christian reader in 2025.
Yes, sir.
Is it your position that Egyptian architecture doesn't have value?
So, in my thesis, I decided to, take the standpoint of a Christian worldview here in 2025. But I also took the time to bring the definition of truth from Merriam-Webster Dictionary. And I can read that here, or may not. But I also tried to take inspiration from real-life truth. And so with the question of whether or not Egyptian architecture I'd consider it valuable, I'd say it is valuable because in some ways, because the Egyptians did have a lot of beauty and order in their buildings. However, where the Egyptians' architectural style falls short is in the fact that their architecture, it was not based on truth spiritually, but also just in reality, because they built their structures and big tombs and pyramids for their leaders, who they assumed were gods. But this was not the case. They were just regular people. And so they spent all this effort and used slave labor to make these extravagant buildings for these leaders who weren't always the best people. And even though that architecture may be beautiful, it isn't technically as valuable because of that. But also on the spiritual side, because they were also building structures for false deities. So Egyptian architecture and other architectural forms like that do have value, but one can start to see the flaws that are in them because of those points.
The Egyptian architecture that you alluded to and referenced was built over 3,000 years before the birth of Christ.
Yes.
So why would the architecture from the ancient Egyptians be less valuable if they didn't even have an opportunity to look at it from the viewpoint of your religious viewpoint?
Of course, yeah. I kind of said a little bit earlier in my answer, but there is the side of that spiritual, and obviously they could not have known Christ, so they didn't. It isn't not valuable because of that, but because of the other reasons, and that is because they use their architectural style to build big, extravagant structures for people and basically tyrants, and they used bad means to do it. And that kind of ties into my truth portion of my paper, and it's with the worldview. The Egyptians' worldview was to please their leaders by building these extravagant tombs and structures because they believed in the afterlife, and they thought that they need all this stuff. But in reality, they did not, since, yeah, they didn't need it. But yeah.
So is your opinion of value change based on, I guess, the time that the architecture is completed? The worldview of the people who completed the ancient structures that still exist had a much different viewpoint and truth than you do. So the question is, can value change?
No, well, there's multiple factors that you have to consider when you're considering whether or not the styles in the buildings were valuable, and you can put them against the guidelines of did they, not just did they believe in a spiritual truth, which they don't necessarily, I guess, have to, but if they are actively believing in something that is wanting to, their architectural form is benefiting off the suffering of others, and they are using their architecture for immoral things, then I would think that their architecture is invaluable. So.
Okay, well, let's change to Roman architecture that you mentioned. If you think about the Roman aqueducts that brought water into Rome, they were built by slave labor. They were built by people who didn't believe in your religion, but it brought benefit to society by bringing water into the city. So would you say that those aqueducts had value?
Yeah, I think they have value in the sense of their beauty and also their order. But where I would say they're not as valuable is in the truth they are founded on and the worldview that slave labor, it was a bad view that they thought they had to use slave labor to make these structures, when that wasn't necessarily the case. They didn't have to do that. So it does have value in their beauty and the order of the aqueducts, but where it falls short is with the truth. It wasn't built on the right truth.
Why would adding extra decoration to a building make it harder or more difficult for that building to serve its purpose?
Thank you for this question. So I will use the example of the churches that were built during the Renaissance, which are, or the Romanesque churches called basilicas. And these are beautiful, beautiful churches, and they have a lot of detail and decoration. However, they also are, in a sense, kind of museums because of how much stuff is in them and how much detail. And so, since the church's original function was to be a house of worship, because there's so much in there now that is kind of distracting from that main purpose, the building is losing that purpose of what it was originally built for. And so that is a way that it can lose sight, like you can lose sight of what the building is supposed to be for.
Can you give us an example of a building that you're thinking of when you make that description?
I don't know if I can do it off the top of my head. Sorry.
What you said from what add to it, it takes away from. So it takes away from value. I was gonna ask about that.
Okay, yes, ma'am. Yeah, so when you hear that sentence, one might be questioned like, oh, how does adding more take away? But in reality, buildings are built with a purpose, and they may have multiple purposes, but the main function of a building is for it to fulfill its purpose and to do what it was built to do. And so when an architect, they should have that as their worldview and as what they're trying to do. And beauty may come into that, making the building beautiful, but that is the case of the architect over-prioritizing beauty. And so since they're prioritizing making this building beautiful, having so much detail, they're losing the the goal of trying to make their buildings function or purpose.
Well, what if that's what the architect was
Mhm.
intended, because that's what they were paid to do?
Yeah, so that may be the case, but I still think that that architecture is not as valuable because it's not going to serve the people long term. And just because that's happening today in our world, there's many architects who are that are just doing jobs to get the money, and they're not really caring about the long-term consequences of what they design and build. And so that is a problem that we need to tackle. Our architects do need to feel responsible for the future and what they build, because it's going to affect people long after they are gone.
So the Sistine Chapel has paintings all over the roof dome, which are probably extravagant, compared to this building, which has no paintings on the roof. Would you say that this is a truer value or a better truth in this building in the Sistine Chapel because it's not as illustrated or decorated?
No, I think both are just as valuable, but I think it's more a spectrum. And it's okay if you're in the middle or towards one way, but when you go too far, that's when it gets bad, and that's when we have to start to worry and take into account, is this building really fulfilling its purpose, or is it just here for show? So.
You want us to keep going?
What made you choose this? And where did, I mean, it just seems kind of surprising maybe for a high school senior. So what made you choose this topic in particular?
So during my education, we had a class that was based on the book How Should We Then Live by Francis Schaeffer. And I was really inspired by this book because it talks about how our culture is shaped by the people and their worldviews. And it also talks about, I had it in my quote here, but Francis Schaeffer. But it basically talks about how our minds and what we think in our worldview, it flows out into what we create. And so if you don't have a good goal in mind and your mind isn't on doing the right thing, then what you create is not going to, it's going to be more likely that it will not be as good. So it matters our worldview and what we think.
Do you have a favorite time period of architecture?
That's a good question. I think my favorite is probably during the industrial era, and where they started to use a lot more steel. It started to become more accessible for use, and so you see these a lot bigger buildings and skyscrapers, but you also see things like conservatories and greenhouses being made, and these are beautiful structures that display the beauty and order that the human mind is able to create.
Would you agree that each person sees beauty out of their own eyes and
Yes.
differently, no
Yes.
matter what's added to or taken away from?
Yes, I would agree. Beauty is subjective, and one of the things I did learn throughout this thesis project is that even though some architectural styles may be damaging in overuse, I'll use the example of brutalism. The brutalist style is characterized by its use of concrete and geometric shapes, and it doesn't have much color in it. And so if it was used large scale, it would probably make our world a lot more depressing because humans need color. It's what makes life more special. But I saw a study that said that brutalist architecture does have a calming effect because it doesn't have as much color or detail. It's easier when people are near it for them to calm down and have less anxiety. So even though it's like that balancing, even though in large use this style may be bad, it does have some good effects. So yes, I would say beauty is subjective in that way.
Josiah,
Yeah.
we haven't mentioned the
Mm-hmm.
turning it into a center for the eyes.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, that's one of the great things about architecture is that it can be reused and repurposed. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to take away an old style when making something new, but that we can think back through culture and see the value in things. And we can add our own twist to them, but we can appreciate all that came before us. So, yeah, thank you.
Good job defending Mr. Birch. Now we have some comments that we'd like to make.
Thank you.
Anything else that you'd like to say? You want to come up to John?
Oh, yeah, wonderful.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
You had a good presentation, Messiah. I really liked, in the very beginning, you were referencing your notes, but you weren't reading to us, you were talking to us. And if you weren't just reading your paper like this, and that does a lot for your delivery, for engaging the listener to make them want to continue to listen to what you have to say. So I thought your presentation was great.
Thank you.
I made that notation also. That was awesome.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan.
I apologize for being late. I got wrapped up in a project and I apologize.
It's okay. Thank you.
I'm sure you did a great job.
Mhm.
Hello, my name is Evangelina Palacios. Thank y'all for coming today. I'm going to be defending my senior thesis, Digital Dating Abuse, a Rising Mental Health Epidemic Among Adolescents and Young Adults. Technology can be our greatest ally or a silent accomplice, amplifying the hidden harm in our most intimate relationships. Quote unknown. With technology advancing and becoming more and more popular and accessible every day, if you have a partner or a spouse, you're bound to talk to them through your smartphone. Some young people may even meet their significant other through dating apps or social media. However, not every relationship is perfect, and some relationships can be severely damaging. With the rise in digital relationships, the general public, especially young people, must be aware of the dangers of an unhealthy one. The term digital dating abuse might not be something you hear often. It may be merged with the idea of cyberbullying, but it is much worse than that. Someone going through a digitally abusive relationship might be the victim of stalking, constant harassment through texts or calls, being forced to share passwords and private photos or information, and being publicly shamed online. Just like in a typical abusive relationship, the victims are controlled, humiliated, and isolated by their abuser, but sometimes they never have to lay a hand on them. Adolescents and young adults are typically the victims of this type of relationship, and the trauma it brings to their minds can affect them significantly. It can cause lifelong troubles to a developing brain. It can produce anxiety, depression, stress, fear, loneliness, trust issues, thoughts of self-harm, and sometimes even suicide. With the lack of awareness covering this harmful type of relationships, many victims may stay with their abuser for a long time before realizing what they're going through is unhealthy and causing permanent mental damage to them. In some extreme cases, they may even end their lives due to the amount of untreated trauma they're going through. With the stigmatism that digital dating abuse isn't real abuse or is not as deleterious as usual or physical abuse, more and more people will fall into unhealthy and harmful relationships. It's essential to inform teenagers and young adults about this issue. Digital dating abuse comes in many forms and is real abuse. It's more common than ever and can affect anyone. Digital dating abuse is a rising mental health epidemic for modern adolescents and young adults. I'm now ready for questioning.
What are the signs of digital dating abuse that we can look for?
So just like in a in-person relationship, like abusive relationship, there's always signs to look for early on in the relationship, like possibly talking bad about your friends, the person trying to take you away from your friends and isolate you, or they might start calling you names. maybe even lashing out very quickly on you against small things. And all those types of things can also happen online. But they can also they can also stalk you online and harass you on social media, and those things are not very clear in in-person abusive relationships.
Do you think it's a sign of cowardice for someone to abuse someone digitally but not physically? Is that a coward's way of saying what they want to say without looking each other in the eye?
Possibly. I'd say it definitely could be like an easier way of abusing someone because you're not seeing them face to face. And a lot of people have this idea that if I say it online, then it's not going to affect me in real life. So I would say yes.
Would you agree that this is not just with young adolescents, but with older adults also?
I would say that yes, but it's most common in young adults and adolescents because they're the ones that use technology more and meet more people online exclusively.
On page 4, you said that this is the same day modern equivalent to domestic violence. How can harassing somebody on the phone be as bad as punching them in the face?
So I would say that digital dating abuse, it can be just as harmful as domestic violence because of the mental effects of it. Because words can damage you just as much as they can like through a screen and in person. And a lot of people may not think that it's real abuse because they're not hitting you. And physical abuse is very bad. And so is digital dating abuse. They have their different side effects. A physical abusive relationship will leave you with physical harm, but a digital one will leave you with mental harm.
How do we tell people about this? Like you've identified a problem, especially for kids and young people. How do you alert older people and people who aren't tech savvy to this problem?
I think it's important to have resources available to everyone for this and bring awareness to this problem because it's a newer concept. Not a lot of people know about it. But the same way there's things in schools that, like high schools and stuff, telling you about abusive relationships and how you can stay away from them, I think digital dating abuse should also be part of those PSAs. And I think the same way you bring awareness about domestic violence and physical or sexual abusive relationships, you should also bring awareness to digital dating.
So this needs to be included.
I believe so.
You're a young lady. Do you think that families have failed to teach respect for the personhood of people? So kids are allowed to say anything, do anything without any repercussions at all. Do you see a breakdown in the family that is contributing to this?
For the abuser, I would say so. A lot of abusers may come from families that have done the same to them, right? So I think that can have a big part in it.
Do you believe that this, that the kid, the young adult, that would accept this would be someone seeking attention, needing attention?
The victim? Can you repeat that?
Sometimes victims put up with certain things because they need attention. It is their way of getting attention. Would you agree with that? Or
I would say so. A lot of abusers manipulate their victims by maybe taking their attention away from them and then giving it back to them, and so the victim is, wanting to have their attention and their love, but that's just another way that abusers manipulate their victims.
What made you choose this subject?
I've been very passionate about this topic for a while. I know a lot of people online that I have made friends with that have gone through these types of things, and I think it's very important that people know more about it, because it was a lot of years ago. Back then, all those people kind of accepted it as just like what relationships are, because it was happening online and they weren't hitting me, so it wasn't abuse. So I think it's very important for young people to know about this.
Any more questions?
Good job.
Ms. Palacios, I like how you presented. After about 30 seconds, I forgot that you were a high school student. I thought I was listening to college-educated presentation.
I thought it was in a courtroom.
Good job, man. Anything else, Ms. Palacios? Any feedback, preacher?
Sorry.
Any feedback?
Excellent job. You've got good presence. I did not sense that you were reading a script, but I think you were pouring your heart out about a subject that, like you mentioned, you've been passionate about for a long time. So you represented your case and your cause very well.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brad Dickey, and today I'll be defending my thesis, which is swimming a valuable activity for teens mentally and physically? Today, I'm here to prove that it is a valuable activity for teens mentally and physically. Swimming is an extremely complex activity that provides revolutionary improvements in not only your physical health, but also your mental state. Swimming provides multiple benefits that result in a better, healthy young life as well, which is why it is good for these teenagers. I had the opportunity to experience these benefits. I have grown up doing swim. I have done it competitively for a very long time, but I've also had the privilege just to enjoy it as a hobby. With swimming, both competitively and just as a hobby, I can say that these beneficial qualities will be improved in your life, whether you do it recreationally or as a competitive activity. On the physical side, in my thesis, I talked about how your cardiovascular health, your flexibility, stiffness in joints, and your muscle strength and tone will be improved. And on your mental side, I talked about how your sleep, anxiety, and depression, and your stress management will be improved. The more I've swam, I've gained a mass amount of cardiovascular health. And I picked this because cardiovascular health is a very important thing to have in your life, not only as a young person, but as you grow older, you need cardiovascular health to just continue to move and to live. And the amount of cardio that swimming provides is to a whole nother degree. In swimming, you must use your core effectively to benefit anything from your workout. So you have to have cardiovascular health to improve in that. Doing so will enhance and progress your cardiovascular health with your other muscles. With the rigorous movements that swimming provides, not only in the strokes that you swim, but also the stretching that comes with the journey of swimming, you naturally will reduce in your stiffness in your joints, and you will be more flexible in your stiffness in your joints. This will not only help you as a teenager, but again, will help you as you grow older to an older adult. Both of these physical components will lead to further improving your muscle strength and your tone. Through my high school life, and I've seen in others' high school lives, with a job, school, and several activities, I've not always had the greatest quantity of sleep. But swimming has provided me with a a good amount of quality of sleep due to the way it naturally exhausts your body and gives your body off a drowsy sense, leading you to not only almost be forced to sleep because your body needs it, but you crave to sleep because the drowsiness you have. I also talked about how your depression and anxiety will be improved in swimming. And this is done so because swimming not only shapes your mind and your body, but it also challenges your mind and your body. And challenging so will improve your mind and body and will give you a more positive and healthier outlook, and will create a healthier and more positive body and mind. Lastly, swimming will help your stress management by relaxing your body due to the breathing patterns and the motions that you move in the water, but also scientifically it releases endorphins out of your body, which is a main factor of teenagers' stress and why they stress. And I think it's a clear factor that in someone's life, if you look better physically and mentally, then you're going to feel better mentally and physically, which is why I think swim will affect your life mentally and physically as a teenager. Thank you. I'm not ready for a question.
Who influenced you to become a swimmer?
I was putting it as a young child just for swim lessons because we live in Florida, and so I did it. That's why I did it kind of as a hobby. It was just something that I went and did, and then I just grew to have a passion for it and chose to do it competitively. So it was my parents putting me in it, but me learning to love the sport.
You indicated swimming is a valuable activity for teens mentally.
Yes, ma'am.
Explain how.
So I have seen several of my teammates be affected mentally, and even me mentally. In every teenager's life, you're going to be challenged with a sleep schedule and anxiety, depression, and managing your stress. And like I said in my paper, me having, since I was 15, 16, having a job and school and a sport, I had a lot of things to manage, and stress was definitely a thing that just was constantly in my life. And swimming, not only my team and the good environment, helps me kind of be distracted from all my stress. Like I said, it scientifically does help because it releases endorphins out of your body, which will naturally relax your body. And some of my teammates, a lot of them, if they don't swim a certain time that they want, or they didn't swim exactly how they wanted, they're very prone to anger. And seeing a lot of my teammates grow in that aspect because of swimming, and learning how not only scientifically it'll affect your brain, but also the way swim challenges your mind and the way you have to push through it and you have to be disciplined with it. It grows you as a person and you learn how to face challenges.
Can you give us any arguments why somebody would not want to consider swimming? What are some of the negativities or bad side of swimming?
I think in swimming and in really everything, especially sports, if you do something wrong, then you're probably going to get negatively, something negative is going to happen to you. In swimming, for instance, you do have to have a precise technique to do the strokes, and if you do them wrong, there's a chance that you could be injured. But I think for those who do want to do swim, whether it's just hobby or as a competitive sport, you will naturally learn by your coaches or by watching videos or watching others. You're going to learn how to have that right technique. And so with that, all these mental and physical aspects will be applicable to your body.
Besides the risk of injury, can you think of any other reasons why a teenager should not get into swimming?
I think that swimming is a hard sport, and I think that some people, if they don't, even as low as it goes, is if you just don't have the want to do it. Like I said, I started swimming when my parents put me in it, and I learned to have the love for it. And so I've seen multiple people on my swim team. They quit because they learned that they just plainly do not like swim. And I think there are other aspects of some people do have like physical disabilities who may not be able to swim competitively, but I think that even when it goes to like water therapy or something, even that has effect on these things. And so I think it's down to the choice of whether you would want to commit to do swimming as an activity or as a competitive sport.
Do you think any body style can become a swimmer?
I think,
Michael Phelps.
right. I think at the beginning of your journey in swimming, your body may not be as prone to the sport, but I think that's also the beauty also in swim is how it can physically shape you into a better fit. I've seen with my own eyes people who come in swim and they start and their bodies aren't necessarily made for the water and to swim, whether it's because the shape they're in or because they're not used to it, which is why I chose swim, because swim is such a mental battle, and you may not have at the start a perfect body for swim, but pushing through that and finding your technique that will move you through the water, right, and finding how you move in it is what can shape your body to be a good swimmer.
Did it put you in the gym any to get more prepared for swimming?
I personally, I did not do a lot of gym training for swim. I do know several people who have done it and it's benefited them, and I know several who haven't done it and they were able to accomplish these things still.
Why did you put that swimming is first and foremost a resistance training sport?
So swimming, so water, if you don't move with it, it's always going to fight back at you. And I just thought of, when I wrote that, like if you're in the ocean and a wave's coming at you and you're going into the wave, it's the resistance is going to push you back. And so much like weight training, weight training is more of a rigorous movement, and you have to, there's nothing holding back the weight besides maybe gravity. But in swimming, the water's just there, and you have to move your body correctly to go through the water. And if you do it wrong, that is why there's harmful consequences to it. But to correctly move through the water, you have to do it with the right technique, because water is a stronger element, and if the water is going at you at a certain way and you're going at it differently, or even if it's still and you're just moving at a wrong pace or wrong timing, then it's going to resist your body.
Sounds scientific.
What is the strongest argument against your thesis?
I would say the fact that some people may think that, for instance, that they don't have the body to swim, or that they don't have the want to swim, and that is a factor that I've seen, but that's the whole point of why my thesis is what it is that it will improve you mentally and physically, and that you're not going to start with all those benefits already in hand. And you have to start at some point, whether your body is more acclimate or applicable to the water or less applicable to the water. Either way, it will be improved in that.
You think competitive swimming is in your future?
I think it's an option in my future, but I'm not sure if I'll actually take heed to that or not.
feedback now instead of questions? Feedback?
You knew, of course, what you were
Yes,
writing
ma'am.
because you are a swimmer.
Yes, ma'am.
So I enjoyed listening to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good presentation.
Thank you.
Just like the other two, I'm really impressed at how well the students here are able to speak publicly, and answer questions. You did a good job.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I just want to thank you guys all again for coming. Thank our judges. They did not just show up today. They actually read through all of these students' papers and made notes and came up with thoughts of things that they would ask when they were here. And so we really are so grateful for the time, commitment that you poured into them, and that you have poured into them over the years. I know lots of you guys have been involved with these students for several years, and we just thank you. As we go to send them off, we know that we weren't alone in all of the ways that we have gotten them ready to be young adults in this world. And so thank you so much, judges. Thank you, families, for your support. That ends our first group. We will come back again at 4 p.m. for our second group. And I would just ask if our students that presented in the first group and our first group of judges, if we would allow them, I'm sure the students would love to tell you guys thank you personally, and maybe we could grab a photo. But otherwise, we'll see you back at 4. Thank you.
I was listening to you. This is awesome that they're able to stand there and to argue there, not knowing what their questions will be. I'm gonna get to all of my babies. You all did wonderful. Absolutely. Y'all absolutely amazing. I enjoyed it so very much.
I've never seen a homeless man in a Colombian shirt.
Do you want me to know since you're the gal?
Oh,
Okay. I was thinking Ava because she's a girl, but okay. That's fine. How you?
Why don't you guys maybe step forward on the judges? All the way. There you go.
Where are we standing?
You want to stand on
Where
this?
do you want us?
There you go. Then you guys can stand on the top maybe that would work.
Stand behind you, you're shorter. Judge, honorable judge. Where do you want me? Yes, right here. Over here.
See, I told you she would grab. all of you guys.
Hello? 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 Hello?
Good afternoon again. If you are here for Group 1, you've already heard this speech. Thank you for joining us for today's second session of Senior Thesis Defense. This event marks the culmination of years of study and discussion with Classical Conversations Challenge program, and our students have worked hard to form thoughtful arguments and communicate them clearly. For this session, we are thankful to Pastor Mitchell Landris, Jennifer Landris, and Leah Gibson for serving as judges. Our first presenter in this group is Kaylee Bush. Following Kaylee, we will hear from Morgan Michael and Lizzie Agee.
Hi, my name is Kaylee Bush, and I will be presenting my senior thesis defense. The erasure of women in sports through transgender inclusion. In recent years, the inclusion of transgender women, biological males who identify as female, in female athletic competitions has sparked significant debate. Proponents argue for inclusivity and equality, while critics contend that such inclusion undermines fairness and erodes the value of women's sports. This paper argues that allowing biological males to compete in female sports devalues women, undermines decades of progress in women's rights, and introduces significant physical and ethical disadvantages that cannot be ignored. Key definitions: sex, a biological classification based on anatomy, chromosomes, and reproductive systems, typically male or female. Gender, a social and cultural identity that may or may not align with a person's biological sex. Transgender, an individual who identifies as a gender different from their sex assigned at birth. Transgender woman, a biological male who identifies as female, often after undergoing hormone therapy or surgery. Puberty blockers, medication used to delay the onset of puberty. Their long-term effects on development and mental health are still being studied today. Truth, that which is in accordance with fact or reality. Female, an adult female woman with XX chromosomes and childbearing reproductive organs, born female. Thesis statement. The value and integrity of women's sports are being eroded by the inclusion of transgender women, biological males, in female athletic categories. This not only creates unfair advantages, but also signals a larger cultural shift away from objective truth and biological reality. Argument 1. Biological advantages persist post-transition. Even after undergoing hormone therapy, transgender women retain numerous physical advantages developed during male puberty. These include greater muscle mass and strength, higher bone density and lung capacity, and superior cardiovascular endurance. Research consistently shows that testosterone suppression only partially reduces these advantages, which remain significant when comparing athletes head-to-head, especially in high-level competition. The inclusion of transgender women in female sports therefore introduces unfair competition and increased injury risks, particularly in contact sports. Example, Leah Thomas, a transgender swimmer, ranked far lower in male competitions, but became a national champion in the female category, sparking widespread debate. Argument 2, undermining the purpose of women's sports. Women's sports were created to give females a level playing field in a world where male physiology typically dominates athletic performance, including biological males, displaces female athletes from podiums and scholarships, discourages participation due to perceived unfairness, and undermines hard-won legal protections like Title IX. Rather than empowering women, these policies inadvertently erase their achievements and opportunities. Argument 3, ideological pressure, and cultural hypocrisy. The transgender rights movement often presents itself as inclusive, tolerant, and safe. However, there are growing concerns about the intolerance during dissenting views, particularly from women in faith-based communities who uphold biological definitions of sex. Public discourse has shown individuals being harassed or canceled for stating biological facts, instances of violence and arson committed under the guise of activism, censorship of valid concerns, especially around children's exposure to puberty blockers and irreversible surgeries. Argument 4, psychological, social, and medical risk. Transgender individuals, particularly youth, face high levels of psychological distress. There's growing evidence that hormone therapy and surgeries do not always alleviate gender dysphoria. Some individuals detransition and express deep regret. Suicide rates remain high after transition, raising questions about the effectiveness of current medical approaches. Case study. The tragic case of the Reimer twins, where David was raised as a girl after a botched circumcision, demonstrates the psychological toll of forced gender identity and challenges claims that gender is purely a social construct. Counter-arguments and rebuttals. Counter-argument 1, trans inclusion promotes equality. Equality must consider context. Equality in outcomes must not come at the cost of fairness and competition. Just as we separate by weight class or age in sports, separating of biological sex ensures fairness and safety. Counter-argument 2, hormone therapy levels the playing field. Studies show that hormone therapy does not always fully eliminate physical advantages. In elite sports where inches and seconds matter, even the small differences can determine the outcome. Moral and legal considerations. Biological reality must be a foundation for legal and sporting frameworks. Truth is not subjective, and redefining it to suit ideology sets a dangerous precedent. The rights of one group should not trample on the rights of another, especially when safety, opportunity, and fairness are at stake. Conclusion. The inclusion of biological males in female sports is not a victory for inclusivity. It is a betrayal of truth and fairness. As we drift further from acknowledging biological realities, we risk erasing the very meaning of womanhood in competitive sport. We must return to protecting the spaces and rights that women fought so hard to gain before they are lost under the weight of ideological activism. Thank you. I am now ready to be interviewed.
Nice job, Katie.
Thank you.
What made you choose this topic?
So I have a personal connections to this topic. In early August, I was asked and recommended by multiple mentors to apply to be in the Miss America organization. So I did exactly that. I pushed through being the hardest I've ever been in competing, and I won the title of Miss North Florida. Now, about a month after I had been crowned, whenever I went up to do a photo shoot, they had presented me with the newly revised contract with the new false definition of female, a born female, or someone that had had full sex reassignment surgery. So after processing this and taking it all in, my directors let me think about it for a little bit. So after thinking about it and realizing that I would not give up the truth for a lie, I asked the Miss America organization to please stand on biological truth. Because after we had seen Miss USA go down such a rocky road with, a few resignations, and I said, Miss America has empowered women for over 100 years. So let's not go down this path. And so after multiple attempts of asking them to stand with real women, they refused and relinquished and took away my title from me and my opportunity to compete for Miss Florida America in my scholarship opportunities.
My question, first question, has to do with the future of this issue. Do you see a time when this issue will self-correct? Will there possibly be a third category beyond male and female? Or do you possibly see it eliminating female sports altogether?
Do you expect the wicked to elect righteous policy, is what I often ask myself. It is so important that the church stands up for biological truth, because how else will godly policy be elected? I hope that we will return to biological truth, and that's why I'm making a stand here today. I pray that's where we go. But however, I do also believe that having a separate category for transgenders is much better than allowing transgender women to compete in real women's category.
Hi, Kaylee.
Hi.
You did very well, and you speak very well
Thank you.
also. My question is, trying to figure out how to word this so it's not confusing to you. But was there a point that you came across in your research that you found hard to argue your point against, or find research in arguing that point in your favor?
So in today's society, it's being pushed really hard that we normalize false identity, transgenders. And although it was challenging to find fact, or it wasn't hard to find fact, I was more finding feeling actually behind the transgender movement. But it was challenging to find sources that weren't biased. As we know, the internet is not unbiased, so that was a little challenging, but speaking to people such as Riley Gaines and having a one-on-one conversation to be able to ask them their personal testimony, that's really given me, it's helped support me in my argument. So although there were those challenges, I definitely got some truth out of it too.
I wanted to know which argument I know which one I thought was the strongest. Which argument do you think was the strongest, and what evidence did you use to support it?
So I'm doing this for the next generation. I'm doing this for posterity. I don't want them to have to be complicit in a lie that a boy can become a girl and a girl can become a boy. These surgeries that little boys are having done to their bodies, that's castration, emotional and physically. And I don't want any of these boys to go through any of that. So I believe that my strongest argument was the psychological, social, and medical risks. Because time after time, we've seen these surgeries fail once and again and again. There's like a 0% chance that these surgeries are successful because you cannot change from one sex to another. Chromosomes are not changeable. For example, the Reimer twins, where David was raised as a girl after a botched circumcision, both him and his twin brother committed suicide after raising awareness about this. And I think that lives are what matter the most at the end of the day. So I think that these social, medical, and psychological risks is my strongest argument.
You mentioned sports a lot, and especially in contact sports. Biological males have advantage muscle mass, testosterone, bone mass, things like that. Your opening illustration was about a pageant. Do you think that biological males competing as females have the same kind of advantage that they do in sports?
Yes and no. But at the end of the day, we should stand on truth. So whether or not that's in a physical, contact sport or that's in a pageant, we cannot drift any further from the truth or we will be lost as a nation.
What were some of the biological advantages that men have over?
So I listed a few. These are just a few of them. Greater muscle mass and strength, higher bone density and lung capacity, and superior cardiovascular endurance.
Last question from me. In the scope of the semester, obviously you have multiple assignments, you have other assignments that you have to do for your CC and as well as homeschooling. When you were done with the paper, when you were done with the thesis, were you happy that you had achieved everything you wanted to achieve? Is there more work to be done? Are there parts of your thesis paper that you would like to see strengthened and improved for possible like publishing, things like that? Are you happy with it? Do you think there's more work to be done?
So the paper itself, I will say I'm pretty proud of, but where we are as a nation, I'm not so proud of. My research might have been a little different than some of the other classmates because I'll say I lived it, for lack of better terms. Like I said, getting to meet Riley Gaines and some of these, right activists has been really, really cool. But when I look at it as, do I want to push it out? Do I want to get my story out? That depends on if Miss America corrects their definition of female to save boys. So, and to embrace natural masculinity and to embrace natural femininity. So we're kind of on a pause on that, and we're going to see where it all goes. So.
Okay, this is the part in this session one where we did feedback. You did a great job.
Thank you.
You were always so poised. I tell you this every time I hear you speak, and I have a lot over the years. You're very, the way you carry yourself is very gracious and confident. So I always appreciate your speaking style. No matter the content, you are always ready for it. I always am also impressed with the way that you can think on your feet, which is a difficult skill. Public speaking is hard enough, but then to have to answer questions that you were not handed ahead of time, that is a great skill in defending truth. We're not throwing any curveballs at you today, but
thank you.
That will happen out there
Yes.
in the Wild West, right? So my advice to you would be to keep leaning into that confidence and know, even when you don't have friends on a panel, that you've got the skills you need to do this.
Thank
just
you.
Did.
Thank you.
So you did a really good job. I loved your topic choice. I'm a swim coach, so this has been on my radar for a long time. It saddens me because I see how hard ladies are working out there to improve in their sport, and so it's a story I followed, so I was glad to see you chose it. I would say one grow, the baptismal grows. I would say make sure that you always come back to that thesis statement and make sure whatever you're saying is on topic.
Okay.
Just any piece of information, run it back through for the purpose of academics, especially, make sure that you're always, is what I'm saying, defending this statement, this one statement, because this topic is so broad. I
Right.
mean, there's so much craziness around this topic, terrible things that are being done and policies in place, that you could take this topic so many directions.
Yes.
So let that thesis statement be your, like, opinion. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so that would be my only grow. And then just one more glow is that I thought that your counter arguments were good. I'm glad you brought them up because you're always going to have pushback. Right.
Right.
So I'm glad you included that.
Thank you.
I would echo a lot of what Jennifer just said. It's an excellent topic. It needs to be addressed. I think you did a good job in addressing it. Proud of you for that. Also, what you said, you are an excellent public speaker. Lord willing, God will give you a platform to speak publicly on this issue. You make good points in your paper. Even in reading it, I can hear your passion for the issue and the topic. My one, for lack of a better word, I guess my one encouragement to you is keep coming back to it. Keep polishing your arguments. We're here to encourage you. The world of which you need to speak to will not be as encouraging. So keep refining your arguments, keep polishing them, keep doubling back for more support and being able to articulate them so precisely. I would just encourage you to keep doing that. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's hard to follow those two because they kind of took all the words right out of my mouth. But like they said, you did wonderful, wonderful speaker. I'm very impressed with you. I really liked the part where you tied in mental health. As a mental health lady myself at the school system, that is something that I live every day with kids of all ages. So thank you for bringing that up. Your paper had really good organization, good explanations, and like they said, this is a great topic. And it's also a hard topic, and like you said earlier, answering a question, it's hard to find non-biased research, very hard. And I think you did very well arguing your point. My only grow would be just get more references in there, kind of building on what Mitch said. Just continue to come back to it, polish it up. Like we said, it is hard to find non-biased ones, but they are out there. And just keep adding to it because the more references you have, the stronger your argument is going to be.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Morgan Michael, and today I'm going to be presenting my defense for my senior thesis. My senior thesis is art made by artificial intelligence, AI, is fraudulent and counterfeit because it lacks the integrity, goodness, truth, and beauty imbued by a human. I would like us to start by using our imaginations for a moment. I'm about to play out a scene, and I would like you to place yourself in this situation. Imagine that you have been chosen to join a cookie baking competition. You have worked hard to perfect your original recipe. You practiced your baking skills until your cookie that you were making was just right to your satisfaction. Now, in this competition, hundreds of others have also crafted cookie recipes from scratch. The judging takes place, and alas, your cookie does not win. But that's all right, because you understand that there were hundreds of other bakers competing. The announcement is made for the winner. After the announcement, you go over to the winner to congratulate him. Then you ask him what recipe he used to make his cookie was, because you would love to try it out. So, to your utter shock and dismay, the winner confesses their cookies were made or came in a pre-packaged box. The recipe was nothing but a pre-made mixture by a common house brand. You feel slighted and belittled. You spent all this time working to make something creative and original, only to learn that a box cookie wins. You express this to the judges, hoping that they just didn't know that the contestant had cheated, that they just didn't know that the contestant had cheated. The judges disregard what you say, though, ignoring it altogether, because the problem doesn't bother them. So why should they bother to take care of it? AI art is the boxed cookie. The bakers with recipes made by scratch are artists, and the judges are the unsuspecting public or the government. My thesis aims to adequately express the moral dilemma on how artificially made art is fraudulent, or in other words, false, not real art. We have heard it said before that there is no such thing as originality in art anymore. That may be the case. However, that is not what I'm here to talk about today. So please let us get that straight. I believe that for a piece of art to be considered art, it has to have three things: goodness, truth, and beauty. And let me set something else straight. I'm not here to argue what is beautiful to some people and what is not. That is for each person to decide, for beauty is in the eye of the beholder. However, I would like to argue that it is virtue that makes something beautiful. For it to be beautiful, it needs to be good and truthful. And when I say good, I do not mean you must color inside the lines. I mean the morals behind what makes the art good. Did you steal it? Did you lie? What were your intentions? Are you making this art to spread falsehoods? Are you making this art to tell a story, capture a moment in history, record an accomplishment, just to have fun or to learn? This thesis first explains the meaning and context of AI art and then the process of how it's made, specifically how algorithms affect the outcome. The thesis explains what goes on behind the scenes in an algorithm training that AI programmers do not want you to know, and how they use legal loopholes to their advantage. For example, URL scraping is illegal, but because data is being put into legal data sets, nothing can be done about this theft. Data sets are legal because they are labeled as research centers or learning centers. Therefore, AI art programmers can use this information as they please with no legal repercussions. Since you have read my thesis, you will have discovered how artists are being exploited and the truth is being distorted. You will have learned a history lesson about two inventions that changed the artistic industry: the printing press and the camera. You have also learned how both printers and writers had to make compromises, and that just because the camera was invented, artists did not give up, but still persevered in creating art. You have been regaled with the true meaning of creation and the purpose of creating. Next, you were enlightened on the current copyright laws in order to see how artists' rights to their work are being infringed upon and disregarded. Finally, a solution has been presented to give artists an option on whether or not they want to be part of an AI art algorithm. I also suggested that AI art should be required to have a watermark. I have explained a current way that artists can protect their work on the internet. This paper hopefully made you more aware of the concerning AI problem for artists and opened the dialogue to new solutions. My hope is that people will see AI art in its negative light and will be willing to speak up for the truth. Human artists. To create is to be brave, because an artist being vulnerable and inviting the world into his world is also inviting the world into his heart. So artists, let us continue to create with courage, integrity, and noble intentions. I am now ready for your questions.
Hi, Morgan.
Hi.
Good job. My first question is, why did you choose this topic?
I chose this topic because I started getting interested in this topic about 2 years ago. I love creating art myself. I'm a very creative person. I'm constantly doodling, drawing on everything, everywhere, all the time. And so about 2 years ago in our class, we had started going through this artistic journey, essentially, of studying different forms of art over the years and the meaning behind it and the mindset of the people at the time. until finally we had reached modern art. And I had already started coming up with some of my own personal opinions, and I had started thinking that modern art wasn't as real, I would say, of art as some of the older pieces that I was studying. And then our classmates and I started talking about AI art being mixed into that modern art category. And that's what really started making my gears start turning. And so I've since then changed my opinion on modern art nowadays and really have started expressing and seeing some of the falsehoods that come about when AI art is being presented to the public. Thank you.
I'm really passionate about this, and I can see that you are too. I love it. I believe that the heart and soul of anthropology is the reality that we're created in the image and likeness of God. And because God is the creator of all things, He is creative at His core, and we're created in His image and likeness. And so I think my question for you is, can we live without being creative or creating things? Or what is the fate of humanity if it ceases to create?
So I do believe that if we stop creating things, we are going to have more than just lazy people. We are going to have people who are uninspired to do anything. We are going to have people who have no passion, and that is why we create, is because we create when we feel these passions, when we have these feelings, and because our Father, God the Father, has installed His creativity into us, I do believe that we need to exemplify this because we are called to be more like Christ, and if Christ created, then we too should create. And I do believe that it would be very detrimental to society if we stopped creating, because people would stop connecting.
Okay. Your pastor's really proud of you. What would you say is going to be the biggest this issue of AI?
I think one of the biggest hurdles that artists are going to have to overcome are actually a lot of the legal procedures, specifically talking about legal loopholes or the copyright issues that are currently installed right now. Artists are subject to what is called a common copyright law, but that common copyright is utterly useless in court. So it does you no good unless you actually get your piece of artwork certified by the government. And even then, that's not any promise of protection for your work.
So in a perfect world, if all artists were compensated, protected in any of that way, would, in your mind, AI art still be considered not morally great or right, or how would you argue that?
In a perfect world, I believe AI art wouldn't exist. However, that is not possible because if AI art, because it has been introduced to this world, if we were to take it away, I do believe we'd have bigger problems, such as like black markets and terrible things like that. And so I do believe that we actually will have to come up with more compromises than we will revoctions. And so obviously these procedures will take many years and lots of time, but I don't believe why we can't get started right away.
Building off of that, is there any area or subgroup where you think there would be an appropriate use of AI art?
I slightly touch on this in my paper. So there are some companies that will use the AI art to basically put forth an idea or a point that's kind of abstract or absurd. And I do believe that would be all right per se if the artists were getting, or if the algorithm was giving correct credit to artists and they were getting paid for their work, that was taken from them. But also, if companies are using AI algorithms, I would counter that argument by saying, if you're a company that has the money and the means to hire an artist, please do so, because artists already struggle to live off of their pieces of work because they're already underpaid, because people don't see the value in their work that they do. They don't see the time and the effort and the quality and the learning process that they themselves put into the work. They're really pouring their heart and soul into this. And so I really think that my first quote of the paper kind of ties this together. Every artist dips his brush in his own soul and paints his own nature into his pictures. And that is by Henry Ward Beecher.
If the opposing side were here today, what would they say is the value of AI art?
They would say the value of AI art, it's a time saver, it is a money saver. You will be able to get on with things quickly, spout out your ideas very, very fast. Really what they're looking for is work smarter, not harder. But I say that for us to, I say that we've kind of missed the mark when it comes to that. Because when we work smarter and not harder, sometimes we miss the integrity of working hard, because hard work builds your own integrity up and creates good, right morals.
Like we've mentioned, AI is new, but it is moving very fast.
Yes.
So with that being said, when you were working on your paper and you were coming up with arguments to put down, what was the hardest, was there a harder point than others to kind of come up with research with to kind of back up your argument?
Yes, ma'am. There was some difficult research coming up with more than just opinions, I would say. And so what I did is I started looking up statistics on not just people's opinions, but on how it has affected the people. So, like, for instance, they would have statistics talking about how about 53% of the population cannot distinguish what is a real piece of art made by a human and what is made by a computer. That's a little bit over half of the population that don't know the difference.
I especially liked, I thought one of your best points in the paper was that AI art generators are stealing from artists. Could you elaborate on that a little bit? I'm not asking, it was a very detailed explanation and I learned a lot. I'm not asking you to go into the whole thing of how it works, but can you just elaborate a little on how AI art generators are stealing?
Yes, ma'am, I can. So your information, when it's put out there, whether it's private or public, it is subject to being stolen. So there is this, it's kind of a long chain of events that happen to make it, quote unquote, stolen. There are programs out there called URL scrapers or crawlers. They're basically these like bots that scammers will put across the internet that will collect the information. Once that information is collected, that data will be placed into what is called a data set. And the data set is labeled by the government as a learning center or resource center, which makes stealing this data legal. So the initial part of data crawlers, stealing the information, is illegal in the USA. However, because this information is placed into a data set, that's what makes it legal, and that's what makes AI algorithms legally allowed to use pieces of unauthorized artwork.
I don't guess I haven't played with any of these AI programs, so it was all new to me. They can even use an artist's name in the prompt that they're putting into these apps. So I could say, create a piece of art in the style of Morgan Michael, and they could legally use anything you've posted on the internet.
Absolutely.
That's really disturbing.
It is very disturbing.
Yeah.
There was an example in here that at the time, the artist, I forget the exact number, but I think it was probably about 40,000 times his name was used within the past 5 years, and that article was done about 3 or 4 years ago. So I would assume that this artist's name has been used far more than that, and he has gotten no compensation. I've even found personal videos of artists, because once they post their thing up in writing, government will take it down because they don't want artists talking about this, so they'll post up videos. And I have seen videos of artists talking about how AI algorithms and AI programmers will purposefully target them, basically mishandling and in a backhanded slap kind of a way, oh hush, this is our art now and you can't do anything about it, so suck it up, buttercup, is what they're trying to say, but that's unfortunate.
And you talked a little bit, maybe can you explain how some measures have been put in place for musicians
Yes.
to protect them? Can you explain that a little bit?
I sure can. If you would give me a moment to turn to that page so I can properly cite the source. All right. All right. So that is on page 13, quote, dance diffuse. So there is a, oh wait, sorry. My bad. All right. So there is there's a program for AI music, essentially, if you wanted to make music using artificial intelligence, that's called Dance Diffusion, and they, in their bylaws and copyright laws, state, quote, Dance Diffusion is built on data sets composed entirely of copyright-free and voluntary provided music and audio samples. Because diffusion models are prone to memorization and overfitting, releasing a model trained on copyright data could potentially result in legal issues and honoring the intellectual property of artists while also complying to do the best of their ability with the often strict copyright standards of the music industry. Keeping any kind of copyrighted material out of the training was a must, end quote. So the whole purpose in the music industry of artificial intelligence is that they don't want to steal from artists because they realize the dangers that it could cause in court, meaning they would lose millions of dollars, and they just don't want to do that. So they're going to find copyright-free stuff to train their algorithms on. But they will not do that for artists.
Okay, feedback time. I guess
All
I'm
right.
starting. Okay, well, I would just like to start out by saying this was a phenomenal paper. I'm extremely, extremely impressed. Just your vocabulary is phenomenal too, and it's probably one of the most impressive works cited pages I've ever seen. Great arguments. Just, I could, yeah. You get the point.
Thank you.
I can tell that you are passionate about this, which is also helpful when picking a topic. And yeah, I'm sorry. I feel like I'm not doing very good in the evenings. My only grow would be with it being a research thesis paper. You got a little wordy in there, but other than that, but still, you're creative, so I get it. You're really good with words, so you're adding stuff in there, and it's phenomenal. Just the only other thing I'd add is I'm not really sure what your college major will be. You say you're more artistic and creative, but if you would want to major in English or minor in English, I know you'd make an English professor extremely happy. So there.
Thank you.
Yes, I agree with everything Leah said. You are a phenomenal writer, very good. I feel like you probably feel kind of hemmed in by a research assignment. Your creative writing is, and your creativity comes through in your academic writing. You can tell that you're an artist. I love that you chose a topic that you're passionate about, and your passion came through in your writing, like Leah said. I thought you made some really great arguments. The argument about stealing from artists was probably one of your best. Wow, it got really loud. I also thought your argument about, I want to word it correctly, that AI art creates false information because it's so hard to decipher what is real and what is AI generated. It seems like this could be a very dangerous tool in the wrong hands because the public can't tell the difference. So I thought that was one of your really great points too. It was organized so well. It was a really great paper. I've read so many of your papers over the years, and it's so fun for me to see the growth. Like, it's neat to have seen, Essentials, Challenge A, Morgan to this. So it's beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you.
I think my grow would be the same as Leah's. You could, in some settings, more words is better, and others you can condense and get across the same information. So just know your audience. Like, if you're writing for a professor and they appreciate a concise sentence, then do that. But your creativity comes through even in a research setting. So I think that's why you use all the words. But again, wonderful paper, really, really good. I'm so proud of you and the way you can defend a stance. That skill will carry over into so many areas of life. So whether you're talking about AI or the gospel, being able to defend truth is a skill that every Christ follower should have, and you've honed it and developed it beautifully. So I'm proud of you. Good job.
Thank you.
Good job, Ms. Morgan. Yes, everything that they said is true. You're an excellent communicator, good voice, good clarity, good public speaker. You're a good writer. Your sentence structure is very good. Good at explaining things. I wouldn't even call this a correction, just like I know you're going further in academics, you're going to Bible college and things like that. Just one caution, occasionally, and this only happened maybe a couple of times in the paper, you spoke kind of in a pejorative sense, and you at one point on page 9 you called somebody a lazy wannabe artist. and that, I understand that that's just like your passion for the topic coming out, but usually in academic writing we don't name call. But just a caution there for future writing projects in Bible college. They might frown on that, but it was very good, very good. I'm very proud of you.
I think that's it. Good job, Morgan.
Thank you.
First off, I would love to thank the judges for both your time and attention. I would like to thank my family and my class for listening to me ramble about this topic. And thank you to my mom for helping me to hash out what I wanted to say. So, without further ado, I will present my senior thesis defense. To begin, has the internet changed everything? Hello, my name is Lillian Agee, and this is the question that spurred my thesis and encouraged me to research this issue. My thesis discusses the way that the rise of the internet has transformed the way information is collected and how it is viewed. It covers some of the drastic changes that the internet, the World Wide Web, and other social media tech such as YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok have caused in the world. Some of the arguments that are present in this thesis are surrounding the idea that the digitization and or digitalization of our world has transformed the way that information is collected and how it is viewed by individuals, the library, and society. People have not seen a technological advancement such as the internet since the dawn of written books, manuscripts, and the rise of the printing press. However, while these are all great tools, such novel advancements as these, for example, the printing press, set into motion its own set of disadvantages. In this paper, I parallel how some of these disadvantages of the printing press are paralleled with the internet's own set of disadvantages. And some of the drawbacks that were created by the printing press and the introduction of books into daily life have only been exacerbated with the introduction of the internet into all areas of our modern lifestyle. My topic and arguments focus on the fact that with the rise of the internet and the digitization of information, countless bad habits, or rather disadvantages, have arisen in our modern life from this technological transformation. We live in a digital age where individual attention span has shrunk to a staggering degree, a time where the library is struggling to find its purpose, and a place where society's need to conserve information has been reduced to convenience, since everything a person will ever need to know is a mere Google search away. The internet is a great tool. However, with great power comes great responsibility, and while the rise of the internet has led to some beautiful new possibilities, its dark side could be our downfall. While it can be agreed that instantaneous access to information is convenient, some of the bad habits this creates in individuals is a danger to society's future. Coming to a close, I hope this thesis has shown how the internet has transformed the daily lives of individuals, the institution of the library, and society. The digitization of our world has drastically affected how these specific areas of life both collect and view information. The internet has truly changed everything. Through this thesis, I have hoped to bring awareness to some of the changes that the internet and digitization of information have caused in the daily lives of individuals, in the library, and in society. Before ending, I would like to ask the judges to ponder what your life would be like if people spent a little less time on screens and more time exploring the world around them. And maybe even what would happen if more people understood that screen time is not free time. The responsibility that comes with worldwide access to information and instantaneous access to all forms of media via the internet needs to be questioned adequately. With the advent of AI technology, we truly need to be asking ourselves, when does convenience overrule what is efficient or what will benefit our minds and the future generations? Don't let social media take up all your free time. Don't let a quick Google search take away the meaning behind actually interacting and researching information for yourself. All the things vying for our attention and time that you could be spending in real life with other people or family. Don't let the internet take away the importances from daily life, the library, or society. Thank you for your time. I am now ready for any questions.
Very good. Did a great job. Which proof would you say was your strongest and easiest to research?
I believe that my strongest, in my opinion, I truly loved researching and explaining the individual's side of things. It was kind of actually hard to find research for attention span, so I don't know if I would consider that easy research because filtering through all the different research itself was very difficult, but that was probably, I think, one of my strongest arguments for this topic, because it covers the idea that the individual's attention span has actually shrunk in the last, I believe it was 10 years, as I mentioned in my thesis. It's shrunk, and it's now anywhere between 29.61 seconds to 2.5 minutes. And one of the researchers that I mentioned, Dr. Gloria Mark, talked about how during her research, the individual attention span shrunk anywhere between 7 seconds. So that was definitely one of my favorite points to research, and I believe one of my strongest.
Backing off of your answer about, oh my gosh, no, mine's got attention spans. Thank you. It's been a long day, so sorry.
Perfectly.
Attention spans. How would you, based on your research, how would you say that's going to affect our society and the next generation moving forward?
Actually, I discussed this later on in society, my point on society. I talk about how, and I've talked to multiple teachers about this too, about how children are not wanting to learn. The average attention span of people is going to drastically affect how their ability to retain information. And so since our memory is shrinking, basically, I believe that that the internet is becoming a serious crutch, and the future generation, and in the future, it will just become more of a crutch. So.
My question follows that exactly. How do we turn it around? Your opinion on first steps to turn it around as a person, as family, as society, culture? How do we do it?
I touched on this briefly in my thesis. The first main steps, I mentioned briefly, and I did do research on what's called the attention restoration theory, or ART for short. And it's talking about how actually going outside helps reduce stress. And there is multiple studies how screen time is linked to causing more stress. And so I believe that some of the first steps that we need to take as an individual would be to limit yourself. If your job is online, then you need to be making sure that you are taking time for yourself to go outside, maybe read a book, talk to somebody else, make time for not being on a screen. As a family, I would also say definitely limiting screen time. It is not good for you at all. As I said before, it increases stress levels. And so I think then as a culture, it also just needs to be understood that screen time is not a good free time.
Can I, one follow-up, okay?
Yes.
As a teenager, how would you advise us parents to talk to our teenagers and pull back the reins on this? And can we quote you when we're talking to them?
Actually, I believe Ms. Jennifer can attest to my previous paper on the idea of video games in Challenge 3. Well, that was a satirical paper. I believe that the best way for parents to minimize their kids' online behavior is probably to make the idea of going outside a fun experience as their children. You know, when growing up, making the idea of going outside and spending time reading a fun experience and a good thing, you know. So.
One of your sections was on libraries.
Yes, ma'am.
And I know that's something you're passionate about, because I know you. What do you see as a path forward for libraries?
I've actually seen a lot of libraries, as I stated in my thesis, the traditional idea of a library as somebody who is cataloging books and maybe stacking shelves, a lot of that is done by a program. And so you're seeing a lot of libraries integrate the internet into its institution. In public libraries especially, their job is to cater to the public. Depending on what a library's, who it's catering to, like a private library is going to probably be more privately based, like what research it's conducting is going to be more individual, whereas an academic library is going to be more academic and research based. But a path forward for libraries is definitely making good information accessible. The internet itself is not a bad thing. you know, it's just created a lot of bad habits. And I think one of the things that I kind of touched upon briefly was the idea that information is very hard to sort through. Finding good information, I mean, in CC we've always talked about how, you know, you need to be checking up on your sources. Where is this information coming from? Actually, I have a testament to this in my paper, as it was very shocking to find that the idea of the goldfish theory is not true. The idea that our attention is anything less than a goldfish is not true. People cite that study for its jaw-dropping effect. They say that the average attention span is anywhere between 12 to 8.25 seconds, but this study that they cite is actually a Microsoft survey that was done in 2015. So it was very shocking to find that, because the source that I originally went to was saying that, oh my gosh, this study has been done and it's showing that we have an attention span of that less than a goldfish. And so I kind of went back to their sources, and I eventually found some more recent studies that I preferred over the Microsoft survey.
You made several phenomenal points in this paper, and in my personal opinion, you could one day add research. The points that you made could be their own research topic, as you probably know based on your
yes,
research.
ma'am.
My question would be, out of all the points you made, which one would you feel like you are the most interested in building research on?
Honestly, that is a very hard question, because it took me, my classmates can attest to this, this is not my original thesis. My thesis changed 2 or 3 times, and it was actually because I find the idea of information fascinating. And I started debating about, like, well, do I want to be a librarian? Is this a path that I want to go down? And so what does the library look like? What is the library's job? And so I kind of went through and I was like, well, what happens when information gets lost? And so I was going to go through in my thesis and kind of explore the historical aspects of what happens when information is lost. But obviously that's not what my thesis is on. So I eventually went to the idea of propaganda and the idea of information as propaganda and how that looks in the lives of individuals in the library and in society. And then with a couple more things being tweaked, I eventually found a topic that I could ramble about for hours. But going back to your original question, I actually would be very, very interested in more research on the individual attention span. That is research that is actually being actively pursued. One of the studies that I found, which cited the 29.61 seconds, was actually a very recent study. I believe it was done in the last couple of months. And so that was a very, very interesting topic that I truly loved learning about.
Yeah, it's funny she said that about each of your proofs could have been its own research paper. That's literally one of the things I wrote. Like, you could have written a whole paper on any one of those. So I know this was a long paper, but could have been like 3 times longer. Thank you that it wasn't. But
I apologize for its length.
No, it was just right. But you could for sure hone in on one of those proofs and publish something. Like you're a great writer, a good defender. So yeah, I would like for you, as my last question, to tell me how the internet has created an echo chamber of sorts for people and their opinions.
Okay, so this is a lot of my what I've seen personally. Actually, I used to love watching a lot of podcasts, and in my free time, that's kind of like been my thing. And so you see a lot of times that a lot of right-wing podcasts cite that the idea that a lot of younger people are getting stuck in an echo chamber. And this idea of an echo chamber is in the internet, on social media platforms, or things like, we've seen a lot of short-form content recently, so things like Reels or YouTube Shorts. There is an algorithm that basically programs and sees what you like and what you dislike. Well, slowly you kind of end up getting stuck in what you only like, because it finally figures out, well, she likes this, then I'm just going to kind of show her this. And so that was kind of what I was pointing towards when I said an echo chamber of sorts, because when people get stuck in their own ideas, it becomes hard for them to confront ones that aren't their own. And so that is my fear for the future generations, is that because you have these algorithms that just kind of see what you like and dislike, it's just going to show you what you like, creating a dopamine which causes internet addictions and social media addictions. And so I suppose that is my fear for the future generations.
My last question is this an American problem? Is it a Western or developed countries problem, people who have the internet? Is the whole world dealing with this? Are there any developed countries who are not seeing this kind of depleting attention span?
That is a very good question. I think that is actually, it is actually a problem for the entire world. As the internet gets more accessible to populations that maybe currently don't have it, I believe that, yes, they will see the drawbacks that the internet has created in Western societies, in European societies, in Asian society. I think that it is a worldwide problem. It's not just towards the U.S., it is a worldwide problem. And as the internet gets more accessible to other people, it will become a global problem.
We're going to move into feedback. You did really great. Nice job, Lizzie. So proud of you.
Thank you.
I loved your whole paper. You're such a good writer. You're a great defender of any stance you take. I already knew that about you, though.
Thank you.
You're my student for a long time. Even down to like Mitch and I were talking last night, your defining of terms is so refined. Did you notice this? Like so, just articulate in the way that you didn't just cut and paste a Webster dictionary. You went into like, for the purpose of this paper, this word will mean this, even though sometimes it's used in this way. But it wasn't redundant. It was good to clarify your terms. So even those little details were so good. I think my favorite proof was your daily lives and how it's affecting us as individuals was probably your strongest and most interesting to me. I do think it's almost rewiring our brain, what is. And so I loved all of that information. All of your points were very strong. This is not really a grow, but I do think you could have chosen just one of those proofs and really done a whole. This was good. It was very good. But I do think, like, if you wanted to publish something, you could hone in on one of those and write a whole book. I mean, it was very good. I think that was probably my only grow. You're very good at building an argument and defending an argument.
Thank you.
Very good. And that, like I said before, that's the skill that CC is. That's why we give this assignment, is because you guys, as Christ followers, you're being sent out to defend truth and the gospel. And so practicing this, and you're very good at it.
Thank you. Thank you
So
very much.
continue in it, and whatever path the Lord leads you on, it's a gift that you have. So find a way to use it, even if it's not in a career path. Keep doing this, because you're very good at it.
Thank you. I enjoyed it, actually. Thank you very much.
yes to everything that Jennifer said. It is so well written and such a well defended thesis. Many excellent points, great definitions, which I think was my comment, by the way. Copyright.
Morgan.
I was going to say, and I say this as nicely as possible, you are such a good arguer. Like, yeah, I pity your future husband. You're so good at this.
Thank you.
But it's so point by point and so precise. Your definitions are sharp. It's step by step defending your points. You are such a good writer and arguer in the best sense of the term. I really, there's not much to critique at all. The only thing that I would say as the reader of the paper, is if you could like break the paragraphs up, like make the paragraphs shorter, and so that it kind of would help the flow of the reading. But other than that, really great, really well done. Yep.
Thank you so much.
Literally copying, pasting what they just said. Again, phenomenal paper, fantastic arguments, another amazing works-cited page. I'm so impressed with what I've seen today. Your defense was fantastic, especially when you said you wanted to continue research on attention spans as somebody who works in the school system and sees it every day, what it is doing to our children. Yes.
I have talked to other teachers as well.
Yes.
I understand. Yes, ma'am.
I could probably talk to you hours about that, and probably give you some really good information. Just some.
Thank you.
Yes. So, but yes, I also, just a little note. I don't know why, but I really love the printing press / internet, because really, that really was like the last time in our society when we had such an influx of being able to get our hands on information. So that was a really impressive thing, especially as a teenager. I'm not that old, okay, but I'm still older than you. And we don't, in our minds, we don't really think about that. We only think, oh, we're like the kids of the internet. So that's how we've always gotten information. But yeah, I don't really have another great speaker.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, that concludes our second group of students. They did excellent. Thank you again to our judges. We appreciate it. And again, I said this after the first group, and so if you've been here, then you're going to get tired of hearing me say it. But they took these papers. I emailed them to them 2 weeks ago. They have taken time to review over the papers during these last 2 weeks, read through them, make notes, come up with thoughtful questions. And so much more than giving of their time just for this hour and a half, they've really poured in for these last couple of weeks. And for most of them, for several years or more. So we're so grateful for you. We're so grateful for the way that you have supported and encouraged our students today. So thank you, judges. Thank you, families. Thank you, students. We are set to be back at 5:30, so that's a 15-minute break. Thank you.
I got my CC shirt on.
Thank you.
She brought socks. Like,
Well, I was faster, so.
she brought socks for everybody?
Yes, I'll go get them.
Thank you. That is your sugar. You had a word, Morgan.
like those heels.
Why'd you wear heels? Because they make me taller.
Oh, yes, now she's like on the same height as all of us. How's the weather out?
It's the same, and it hurts. She was saying that she offers everyone like free food and no one wants it. Literally, I've offered food today. No one wanted it.
Okay, we have made it to our final group of the day, which means that if you've been here since 2:30, you're about to hear this speech for the third time. We welcome you to our Classical Conversations of Wauchula Senior Thesis Defense Day. We're honored to have you here as we celebrate the academic growth, critical thinking, and courageous public speaking of our graduating Challenge 4 students. Each student has up to 5 minutes to present. They will stand for questioning for up to 20 minutes and then receive some feedback from the judges. We are so grateful to our third panel of judges this evening. We have Melanie Roberts, Nicole Drake, and Robert Heinerman. The order for this final panel is Anandra Ramkasoon, Ben Hansen, and Jake McDonald. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank you all for being here today. The judges, thank you very much for your time and for reading my paper. Support of my family, my friends, I really appreciate you being able to walk me through this process. And I'm here to present my senior thesis, Defending the Electoral College of the United States of America and Why It Is Necessary for the Presidential Elections. Quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." End quote. These words, found in the Declaration of Independence, perfectly describe the subject of today's discussion. The Electoral College is the system America uses during the presidential elections. It is a group of people who come together to vote on behalf of their state's popular vote. The presidential candidates need at least 270 out of these 538 electoral votes to win the presidency. Many controversies have been expressed for this system, which need to be clarified. My thesis will prove that the Electoral College is vital for the presidential election to equalize votes from all states, to organize the method of calculating results, and to honor the intentions of the Constitution. The first defense that is explained is how the Electoral College equalizes votes from all states. It explores the process of presidential campaigns, the role battleground states play, and how pure popular vote elections would be the end of fair elections. The next defense shows that the Electoral College organizes the method of calculating results. Because of the voting process on election night, the security system of the ballots, and the overseers of vote verification. The final defense explores that the Electoral College honored the intentions of the Constitution by going through the creation of the Electoral College, the duties of an elector, and that the Electoral College has withstood the test of time. These significant points address and clarify misconceptions that are believed in the present day. They prove why the Electoral College works for any election and that it is for the people of America. The process of presidential campaigns is a key factor for how the people vote. It is the candidate's duty to connect with the people and to be someone they can trust. The role battleground states play is just as important as any other state. They are unpredictable factors that can impact the result of the election at any given point. And pure popular vote elections will lead the country into a second civil war. They are time-consuming, disorganized, and chaotic. It is impossible to calculate everyone's individual vote within the time frame that is set. Therefore, the Electoral College equalizes votes from all states. The voting process on election night guarantees that all votes are taken into account and submitted in a timely manner. It has evolved throughout history and has become a familiar system that functions well. When there were malfunctions, actions have been taken to repair and improve it. The precise training that the election team must go through enforces the security system of the ballots. From in-person to mail-ins, it is impossible for voters to submit faulty ballots. The overseers of vote verification make it their priority to verify every vote and submit all votes to be taken to the state capitol. If there are inconsistencies with the ballots, they will address and resolve it. These points prove that the Electoral College organizes the method of calculating results. The creation of the Electoral College was a top priority for the framers of the Constitution. These people have the right to choose who leads this country. Alexander Hamilton wrote the 68th Federalist paper about the appointment of the president and why it needs to be by the people and how the Electoral College provides that. The duties of an elector are to represent the voice of the people and the state. The majority of electors are faithful because they understand the significance of the votes. Through many challenges, trials, and one added amendment, the Electoral College has withstood the test of time and helped uncertain elections find results. The Electoral College honors the intentions of the Constitution, thus making it necessary for this day and age. The majority of the people who are against the Electoral College present various arguments, such as that it gives value to some states more than others. They will present that the way the electoral votes are distributed is inconsistent with the actual population of the state. For example, they will say that Kansas has one representative for every 500,000 people, whereas Texas has one for every 763,000 people. They say that it takes more votes from a bigger state like Texas to equal one electoral vote, giving leniency to the smaller states. This argument is invalid because the Electoral College makes all states heard. If it were abolished, the priority would go to the big states only. Another argument that people will present is that the candidate who wins the Electoral College does not necessarily win the national popular vote. They define this as a disregard for the people's choice in favor of a certain selected group. It is seen by them as undemocratic and unconstitutional. They will bring up elections such as Bush versus Gore and Donald Trump's 2016 victory to support this claim. The flaw with this argument is that the Electoral College is meant to measure the votes in the state, not each individual votes across the country. If America were to have such a system, months would be added to the calculation of the winner. Based on the thorough research, defenses, and explanations that have been presented, it can be concluded that the Electoral College is vital for the presidential election to equalize votes from all states, to organize the method of calculating results, and conserve the intentions of the United States Constitution. Would it be easier to live in a country where it is mandatory for all citizens to vote, and if anyone refuses, a fine would have to be paid? Would it be beneficial to participate in an election system where the same person wins every cycle, even though there are multiple candidates who somehow disappear? Is it fair to watch people ascend to leadership because of their lineage, knowing that they would implement policies that do not benefit the entire country? The Electoral College matters to every single American citizen, from Rhode Island to Alaska. The fact that it is included in the Constitution speaks to its significance and importance. On January 20th, 2025, Senator Deb Fischer had these words to say, quote, "The Founding Fathers wrote the Constitution of the United States for America to withstand time and preserve the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness," end quote. The Electoral College continues to provide life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Ultimately, it provides, upholds, and protects the most essential right humans have had since the beginning of time, the right to choose. Thank you. I now stand ready for questions.
So on page 11, you spoke about viva voce, spoken voice.
Yes, sir.
Did that surprise you, and if you could? Okay. Do I need to rephrase? Please. Okay. On page 11, you spoke about viva voce, the spoken voice. Did that surprise you, and could you explain to our audience here what that means?
Yes. So viva voce is Latin for with the living voice. Early on, when the voting system started in America, this was for certain people to go vote with their voice. So they wouldn't write down on a ballot. They would say which candidate they wanted for president. And it did surprise me that this was the system that was used. And I understand that it was abolished for logical purposes, that there was bias. People could be peer pressured into voting for candidates that they don't necessarily want.
Excellent presentation, by the way. How has your research changed or strengthened? How has your research changed or strengthened your view on the Electoral College?
When I first began to research into the Electoral College and write my thesis about it, I was originally going to take a negative standpoint and write against the Electoral College. However, after multiple conversations with my classmates, my mentor, Lauren Bush, and thorough research, especially looking into the Constitution, I understand why we have it and how it has helped our elections become organized and given us clear results.
What values do you see the original founders of the Constitution, what values do you see being upheld by the Electoral College?
The people's rights, first and foremost, that is actually a Bill of Rights. It is the 9th Bill of Rights that was written in the Constitution, and that was a priority for the Founding Fathers because America was living under a tyrannical monarchy. They rebelled because taxation without representation, and the Founding Fathers wanted a new system where the people could be represented and they could have a fair choice in who they wanted to lead their country.
In your research, I'm sure that you probably read a lot of counter-arguments for the Electoral College, and were any that you read convincing enough to try to change your mind?
I would say the strongest argument that the negative team will try to present is that there are faithless electors, and faithless electors are electors who do not vote for their state's popular vote. For example, this past election, Florida voted Republican. However, if there was one elector who voted Democrat, they would be considered a faithless elector. And I prove that this is invalid because, first off, the electors understand the responsibility that they have. And based on my research throughout looking at different elections, there have only been between 1 and 4 faithless electors and they didn't have a whole lot of impact or change to the true result. However, there is one election, the 1872 Electoral College results. This is what the negative team will say. They will say that there have been 63 faithless electors, and they'll say that that is a reason why the Electoral College should be abolished because there could be many faithless electors. But the reason why there were these 63 faithless electors is because one of the candidates had died after the primary elections. And so before the electors could meet, that's when the primaries were done, and the popular vote in their state was for the candidate who died. And so the electors did have a choice to vote for a dead person or vote for someone who could fulfill the presidency.
So I know that you said that you originally started out supporting one side of this argument and then switched after your research. Do you think that your worldview had much of an emphasis on what you chose, or would it have an emphasis on somebody's support of the Electoral College?
So going into this, I did not have a whole lot of information about what the Electoral College was, and throughout my research, I have seen how it truly does help our election systems. And being someone who just became an adult and preparing to enter the world of voting, I understand that the Electoral College is there to help my voice be heard. And to my peers, a couple of us have actually voted in the 2024 election, and the Electoral College has helped their voice be heard too. And based on, we have been talking about this too with my peers who have voted in the past election, that through this research of the Electoral College, they understand its significance now and how important it is for every single American voter to understand the Electoral College.
What would you say the most valuable thing is that you learned about your topic?
Ultimately, that it's fair, that it measures out all of our votes equally, and it gives the smaller states such as Rhode Island and Hawaii a voice. Whereas if we had a national popular vote system, you'd have bigger, more populated states like Florida, California, and Texas deciding the presidency every single time. And that wouldn't necessarily be fair. And so that is the most valuable thing that I've learned from my research.
So you said before you did the research that you didn't know much about it. Are you interested in politics?
I'm interested in learning about the facts of politics.
Okay.
If I'm watching the news, for example, I go in and understand that they have a bias. And especially during election season, there's going to be a lot of bias going around in the political world. So if I were to go into politics, I'd want to go into the facts and really dissect and go into the truth. And this thesis has really helped me to find the facts and go into the truth.
What made you choose this topic?
The 2020 election, when I was in 8th grade, I'd actually already been thinking about senior thesis and what topics I would choose. And so I was looking, and I heard a lot about the Electoral College during 2020, and I wondered, don't we have a popular vote system? Why do we need this certain group of people to replace our voice? And so that's where I went into the opposing team and the negative side. But through this research, my opinion has changed.
I think you did a wonderful job. Your paper was very well written. Your presentation was very eloquent. You are a very educated, well-spoken young lady, and your future is very, very bright. I appreciate your transparency in saying that you were swayed differently by your research. Like, there is a lot of humility and maturity in that. So good job.
I would have to second what she said about your paper. I was amazed at what I was reading, especially coming from a background in higher education. Seeing that, I would just caution you in the future to, I know because it was like double the size of the limit. So I know coming from that educational background in higher ed that some professors may steer away from that. And, you know, I want your voice to be heard, and because you had so much valuable information in there. So just caution you for that going in. You know, I'm sure you're going to be pursuing college after this because I can't imagine you not. But I was very, very impressed.
Can you explain to us how an elector is chosen?
So they're usually chosen during when the parties meet before the primaries. And it's usually the governor of the state who oversees that, and depending on the amount of electoral votes each state has, they choose. There's a team for the Democrats and there's a team for Republicans, the electoral votes. So they choose whoever is the most involved in their party, and you have to be a member of the Democratic or Republican Party to be considered for a spot in the Electoral College. And so they're chosen, they meet after the primaries, so after we cast our votes, and they vote based on who we would like to be president.
So like they said, I was very impressed with the paper. I'm interested in the Electoral College, and I actually learned quite a bit from reading your research. And I think you did a really good job. You explained everything very well, and I mean, you look very relaxed up there. And I just think that you did a really good job on it.
Thanks for being my judge today. judges, obviously. So my paper was on Dungeons & Dragons and the benefits of it. And so my thesis statement was Dungeons & Dragons is extremely beneficial to the minds, emotions, and development of those who play it. At the beginning of my paper, I went in depth on what exactly it is. Dungeons & Dragons is what is known as a tabletop RPG, or a TTRPG for short. What that entails is it's typically played in person with a group of 4 to 6 other players-ish, depending on the game, typically with pen, paper, and dice, right? And over the course of the game, you're going to roll dice, and the dice are going to determine the character you're playing actions. So say that I am trying to scale a fence. I'm going to roll the dice, and according to my character's character sheet, which I would have created, I will get plus or minus numbers to the dice roll. If it's high enough, I successfully do it. If low, it doesn't. And that's, at its core, the base layer of Dungeons & Dragons. Now, it also has something called a Dungeon Master, which is going to be the person that's kind of running the whole show. They're going to be the person that is describing the areas you're in, describing the people you're talking to, the enemies you might be facing. They are the ones bringing the world to life, per se. And so the whole game is entirely dependent on you and the people you're working with. And so without, a group of people, you're not able to play the game at all. And that's the basic of it. But I focused on 3 specific areas in my paper. I focused on emotions, minds, and development. With emotions, I went into mental health a little bit. I had a quote talking about how 1 in 7 10 to 19-year-olds experience mental health conditions. That's from World Health Organization. And I quoted several sources and just showed some examples of how Dungeons & Dragons has been recorded to reduce stress and anxiety and increase self-esteem and self-efficacy. It has also been proven to help with depression and depressive symptoms in people that play it. So I went into that, described that, explained how that worked a little bit. Then I moved on to development. Developmentally, Dungeons & Dragons is very good for the players. It not only in partnership with emotions and mental health, it allows people to work through past traumas by granting them psychological distance, right? You're able to work through things that you might have experienced in your life. Say, saying no, right, is a very loose example. In real life, it might be hard for someone to say no. Dungeons & Dragons gives an opportunity to provide kind of a wall in their mind that allows them to practice saying no in a game where the effects don't matter, as compared to real life. It also helps grow social skills, such as empathy. It promotes teamwork and requires interpersonal communication because the game is told only through the players at the table, right? If everybody leaves or if it's just one person, you can't play the game. You need to be able to work with other people in order to share the story you're all creating. It also enhances creativity and critical thinking skills. Creativity, you're building a world with each other, right? And you're also designing your character sheet. You're designing the character you're playing as, which requires you to connect their backstory, right, to the world of whatever you're playing in. It enhances critical thinking skills because you're required to work in a team to solve almost every problem you're going to encounter. I provided an example in my thesis about players having to explore a sunken ship and how there are a multitude of different opportunities and possibilities, but it's required for the players to actually come to the conclusions of what they need to do. And finally, I talked about minds, how it enhances the educational aspect. I talked about how mathematical concepts are practically utilized, right? In order to succeed in combat, you need to be able to calculate how fast your character is. You need to be able to calculate how many feet away am I from the nearest cover, et cetera, and you need to be able to use real mathematical concepts and even probability, in some cases with the dice rolls, to be able to be successful. It also improves literacy enormously and listening skills, because both are required to be able to play the game, and you will be using them the entirety of play. And those were the big things that I focused on, and I am now ready for questions.
How long does it take to to play the game? Is it?
There have been cases where people have played Dungeons and Dragons for upwards of 10 years because you typically play in sessions, which are like 1 to 3 hours typically, and you'll gather together as a group and you'll play through and you'll tell the story that you're trying to say. And so Wizards of the Coast, the publisher of Dungeons and Dragons, has released little modules, pre-written things that you're able to use that can last anywhere from 4 to 6 sessions, and then people who have really embraced it, gone into, using their own creativity, there are recorded cases of games being played over 10 years for, maybe they meet once a week or 2 times a month.
In your paper, you mentioned that Dungeons and Dragons strengthens the mind, emotions, and development. Which of these 3 areas do you believe is most impacted, and why?
I think it most impacts the developmental side. I think the impact it has on the other 2 should not be understated, but I do think that when it comes to development, Dungeons and Dragons improves it the most because every part of the game is requiring you to use your critical thinking skills. It's requiring you to use your creativity, to use your social skills in order to communicate with your teammates, to communicate with, the world you're building. And so I do think that developmentally is its strongest, improving aspect.
So I think when most of us think about playing a game, the first thing we think of are rules and order and things of those nature that is predetermined outside of what I understand you're explaining here. I have no knowledge of Dungeons and Dragons other than reading your paper, by the way. Do you think that the freedom of expression and creativity in the game setting would have an effect on playing games outside of Dungeons and Dragons?
So Dungeons and Dragons is somewhat of a unique experience. There are a lot of tabletop RPGs out there. There's a lot that have branched off from Dungeons and Dragons since it's kind of the biggest thing. There are basic rules. It uses physics, right? You're not just going to be able to fly to the moon because you want to. However, it does grant an increased level of creativity. I think for the game it works very, very well because it's designed in order to allow players the freedom and stuff to experiment and, work and create new things. I think it does improve, ability to play other things. It improves ability to grasp and understand concepts, right? I don't know if you could translate the skills from playing Dungeons and Dragons to, like Monopoly, for example, but I do think that it would improve most team-based games because it's a very strong focus on teamwork.
In your research, did you find any counter-arguments for the play of Dungeons and Dragons?
I found essentially no counter-arguments to the fact that it improves all these things. There's not a lot of research done on Dungeons and Dragons. It's because it's such a small, in the grand scheme of things, it's one game, right? So not a lot of time and energy has been dedicated to it, but there are a surprising amount of studies and stuff done on it. And so there's not really anything that disproves it. The biggest thing that I run into is, for a very long time, there's been a large stigma against Dungeons and Dragons because the culture of it back at its inception was much different than the culture it is now, because just how it's changed, the player base and everything. Because the game is so crucially dependent on who you're playing it with, it can change from a wholesome experience if you're playing it with, wholesome people to if you're surrounding yourself with a group of crazies, it's going to be a worse experience. But that's really the only pushback I've seen against it is, this game isn't good for kids or for anything, when in actuality it very much is. It's just for the longest time there was a stigma against it, and it's only now starting to come out of that. Stigma, specifically back when it was created, there was a lot of, the crowd that played it was for lack of a better term, like the nerds, the geeks, right? The weird kids at school that nobody wants to associate with because they don't know how to use deodorant. And so for a long time, it was, you don't want to play that. That makes you a weird kid or anything. And so that was kind of what stuck with it for a very long time as it sort of faded away from public consciousness. And then it's come back with a vengeance recently. One of the sort of kickoff points, the show Stranger Things, if you've heard of it, featured D&D pretty prominently, and that kind of kicked off the public interest in it once again. And so now as it's kind of come back into, you know, the public eye and people are playing it again, that stigma, by and away, has been fading, because now that people see it's who you play it with, right? It's no longer just the game for the weird kids.
Kind of spoke to this a little bit, but more so on a peer perspective. But what would you say to a parent who is hesitant to let their child play D&D?
It's funny because I have that experience before. To me, Dungeons and Dragons is a really good game. When you're playing it with a group of close friends, it builds friendship, it builds teamwork, it builds, you know, a desire to work with one another, and it builds a ability to grow connections and deepen connections, right? And it's a social game, right? At its core, you're talking to people for the entirety. Every action is, hey, I would like to do this now. And so I think it's something that helps people grow, and it's something that brings people closer together. And so at its core, I think it is something that is awesome to play with friends, because it allows you to deepen those connections.
What motivated you to choose this as your capstone project? I bet your mom was like, a board game?
Yeah, well.
I mean, it was wonderful, but what motivated you to choose this topic?
I am a big fantasy fan, right? I've always been since I was a little kid, right? You know, some of my first books were reading, you know, fantasy books, stuff like Aragon. And Dungeons and Dragons has always captivated me because I'm also a theater kid. I do musical theater a lot. I enjoy talking with people, right? And so it's kind of just this big conglomeration of everything I love to do. I love to play games, right? And so Dungeons and Dragons has always been something that, you know, I've really loved. And I haven't gotten the opportunity to play it a lot because it's a little hard to set up. You know, getting a group of people to commit to 2 to 3 hours a week consistently is difficult, as I'm sure we all know. But I've always really loved the game, and I've always seen the stigma around the game. And so knowing that, you know, that's not what it is at its core, really, I just wanted to share that a little bit. And I also wanted to just research and see, like, hey, you know, can I put facts behind, you know, my hobby, right? Something I enjoy. Can I put, you know, quantifiable evidence that this is not a waste of time? Yeah.
When I read your paper, it was saved as your name, and I was like, this is going to be really fascinating. And I read your paper, and it was very fascinating. And I had no knowledge of Dungeons and Dragons, and I couldn't wait for you to come tell us about it. You did a great job presenting, great job writing, great job researching.
Thank you.
I had obviously heard a little bit about Dungeons and Dragons when my brother tipped his toe in it a little bit when we were growing up, and that was a long time ago. But, you know, reading your paper really gave me a different perspective on it, because even back then it was, you know, just becoming, you know, a little bit more prevalent, and he only played it for a short period of time, so it's not like I delved into it very deeply. But, you know, your paper was very well written, and I appreciate your perspective on it, and it gave me a better perspective on Dungeons and Dragons.
I also did not know what Dungeons and Dragons was. Your paper actually made me research some things.
Yeah.
But yeah, you did a really good job. I did have a question about, you had the word pilot, mechs and pilot on.
Yes, so.
What is that?
So a mech is a big robot, right, that a person is able to pilot from inside of it. So I think Iron Man's suit, but on a larger scale, right? That was in reference to another TTRPG called Lancer, where instead of being set in like a fantasy situation, it's set in a much more sci-fi futuristic setting, and that's the players, instead of being like, oh, you know, an archer or a swordsman, right, they're mech pilots. Yeah.
Well, we could definitely see your passion through your work here, and we appreciate that. You did a good job.
Thank you.
Hello, first off today I'd like to thank the judges for not only having your time to come here and talk with, or let me talk to you about my thesis, but also reviewing my thesis and looking over it with your time. Hello, my name is Jake McDonald, and today I'm talking about how addictions are not just a lack of willpower. So addictions are often misunderstood as a lack of willpower, as I've learned. They're much more complicated, and addictions change how the brain actually works on a fundamental level by changing the dopamine in our brain. Dopamine is a neurochemical, which means we can't take a pill or get rid of it. It's stuck with us, and it actually has a lot of beneficial uses. It's a reward and motivation to our brain. It helps us feel good. When we have a high dopamine level, it helps us feel alert, more focused. We can get our tasks done. But when we have a low dopamine level, this is where the problems start to arise. Trouble sleeping oftentimes. You have a lack of motivation. Basically, your laziest day, that's probably what you have when you're low dopamine. So what addictions do is you've got your base dopamine level, and when it goes down, or when you have an addiction, your brain goes to that, because what the addiction does is it raises it all the way up to here. You feel amazing, you feel great, but that's only for the first minute. After your brain gets used to this, it raises the dopamine level from here to here. So now, instead of being able to just survive a day doing your normal work, you have to use your addiction or use the supplement, cocaine, whatever your addiction is, to get to this level just to feel okay at this point. And so this is where the never-ending cycle of addictions comes in, because you have to constantly use your addiction to feed yourself to get that same level. The problem is you cannot get that same level because on a fundamental level, your brain's trying to adapt to your new environment, and that's where the problem of addictions arises. I'm now ready for questions.
What motivated you to do this research project?
So I was originally going to do a cybersecurity thing because I'm very into tech, but I actually stumbled across a YouTube video because I'm very into psychology as well, and it was talking about addictions, and I was going to do my paper on addictions, but I was originally going to do more of how to get out of addictions until I was telling people about addictions and stuff, but somebody argued and was like, why don't you just stop? And they thought it was more of just a lack of willpower and not actually that. So then I started researching more into that, and a lot of people believe that it's just a lack of willpower and that you can more of stop and that it doesn't actually change your brain on a fundamental level.
How has researching this topic changed the way you view people who struggle with addiction?
A lot more sympathy for them. It's definitely not a choice that people have once they're in the cycle of addictions. However they may get into that, it takes tremendous amount of work to get out, and a tremendous amount of time and even possibly money if you're trying to get away from it, and you have to reform who you are at a core level in order to get rid of your addiction.
When you were discussing dopamine, you stated people exploit it to our disadvantage. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so as more research comes out about dopamine and how it works with addictions and stuff, for example, gambling is one of the addictions I talk about, and there's an interesting study where they tested monkeys and they gave every time a button lit up, the monkey a treat. And so the monkey's levels obviously spiked with dopamine, but then when they reduced the button's chance of them getting a treat to a 50% success rate, I think it tripled their dopamine levels. And so this is like fundamentally gambling and how gambling people in casinos use it to their advantage, as well as like making all the carpets in a circle and know ways to get out, because they want to trick your brain into constantly thinking you can never leave and are in that euphoric state.
Which addiction surprised you the most during your research, and why?
honestly, it'd probably be the pornography one just because of how widespread it is. And I think it was the third biggest website on the internet and most search requests on the internet. It just surprised me how big of it actually was of an issue.
Did you determine on your own a way of escape or a healing or a solution to the problem with addiction?
Not necessarily on my own, but as I was doing research, there are two fundamental ways that would help you or benefit you the most. The first one was to get yourself held accountable. So whether that be in a group of friends or they have addiction recovery centers where you can go with other people who are struggling with the same thing, and you can lift each other up when you're failing and help each other. But the other big thing is it's called the 3 Ds: delay, distract, and distance. Basically what it means is you first want to delay the urge to do the addiction, then you want to, even if it's for as simple as 5 minutes, then you want to distract yourself with something else, and then you want to distance yourself, because whatever makes you think of the addiction, whether it be alcohol, you want to get rid of all the alcohol in your house, or whether it be whatever it is, you need to distance yourself from it because they'll just tempt you again.
What was the most valuable thing that you learned through the process of doing this thesis?
Like I said, I'm always interested in psychology and why people do what they do. And it just shows how much we can lose control of ourselves when we go down a sinful route and when we aren't held accountable.
Do you think that we can be addicted to things that are not sinful, and can that cause the same reaction?
It'd be a little bit different. So when I'm talking about addictions, it's not being able to stop it and typically having withdrawals from it. So if you're addicted to something like working out, yes, you can go extreme, and if you're working out 24 hours a day, you're going to hurt your body and it's going to damage you. So you can obviously take anything to the extreme and hurt yourself, but when you're typically addicted to something healthy for you, I wouldn't use the word addicted because it's more of a benefit, and typically your body knows how to handle it because it's not hijacking your dopamine levels.
Great job. Your paper is close to my heart, and you did a great job.
I could definitely see a future in psychology for you. You did a very good job, and I'm very impressed with your writing and your paper and your presentation.
Like Nicole said, I think all of us here probably know somebody that's addicted to something, and I think the more research we do, the closer we'll get to trying to figure this out. But I think you're on your way to helping figure that out with your research. You did a good job, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I would like to thank our judges once again. I would like to thank our students, our families. This concludes our 22-hour senior thesis defense day. I did just look at Jennifer about 2 minutes ago as we were nearing the end of this and just reflecting on, I've gotten the benefit of walking down the path of the students choosing these topics, changing their choices, changing them again, turning a little bit, going back to something before, all of those things, right? So some of them came in and they very much knew what they wanted and they stuck with that. Some of them changed their viewpoints on a topic that they came in thinking that they were going to argue differently. Some just changed completely, like Jake said. He was going to do cybersecurity, and then one day came in and said, I'm changing mine completely. And I'm just so proud of them. And so as I was just reflecting on the growth that has happened, both from when I first met many of these students, but even just their growth in the last few years throughout their high school years, I am just blown away. I am confident that we are sending 9 amazing, well-equipped, God-fearing young people out into the world, and that it will be a better place because of that. And so I'm going to say goodbye for now and wish you guys well. There are some snacks in the back, but I'm going to start crying otherwise. And just thank you guys all so much. Judges, if you would allow us to maybe take some pictures and that sort of thing with you, we would really appreciate it. For everyone else, thank you so much and have a good night.